Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Scoreboard Keepers. Today we have Black Christians versus Black Atheists. We'll be right back in 30 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Scoreboard Keepers. You're around here, we don't keep receipts, we keep the score. So if you want to get on the board, make your point. If it makes sense, we'll add it to the board. If it don't, we won't. Scoreboard Keepers.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Scoreboard Keepers. I am your host, the Ref. And what do we have today? We have exactly what it says. Black Christians versus Black Atheists. Where do you stand on this topic? Where do you guys stand at? What do you guys think is going on here? Now, we have a lot of religions in the world. It's a lot of religions going on out there in the world right now. And if you think about it, right? If you think about it, you have a plethora of things that you can worship if you decide to worship that. But then you have some that don't believe in anything. So this right here should be a great debate. It should be some great topics that come up. As you know, anything that makes sense here, we add it to the board. If you're putting up points, if you're making legitimate points, we add it to the board. We listen intently. Remember that, people. We listen intently around here, so we try to score this thing as fairly as possible without any bias. So without any further ado, let's get right to it.
Is Jesus, is his appearance in the Bible?
I believe they describe him with like
feet were
coarse
bronze and hair was
bronze.
yeah.
His feet was black as brass and his hair was that of wool. James Harden? James Harden? LeBron?
Hi, I'm Gen, and I explore social and controversial issues through both sides. Today I'll be moderating this middle ground episode of Black Christians versus Black Atheists. We'll be talking about the connection between race and religion, why Christians leave the church, as well as the communities that exist within and outside of the church. The first prompt is, the Black church shaped Black culture.
If we just look at the beginning of the civil rights movement, a lot of those Black people met up in churches in order to, talk about and, fight for the freedom of Black people. And so we have a lot of gospel music in our culture as well. I know you guys have probably heard some, even the atheists probably grew up hearing a lot of gospel music. Even now, that shapes our culture to this day.
Well, I think it was even further back than just civil rights. It goes back to slavery. It goes back to so many things as a part of our history.
Yeah, I think the Black church fundamentally has helped African Americans stay together. Even today, the Black church serves as a central hub for African Americans to gather and share ideas. Even in my family, the Black church was definitely pivotal for our development.
I think the Black church contributed to the culture of Black folks, just keeping us together as best we could, as best the church could. I think giving us hope. I think it was also a place of education for most of us as Black folks, a place for talent and freedom of expression. So I definitely think it has a bound around us.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel like there was.
Now we have a touchy subject, people. Okay, if you're thick-skinned, this may not be the forum for you if you're thick-skinned. Because when he said freedom of expression, does that include homosexuality in the church? So he tried to make a point there. He cannot receive a point there because I'm not sure that it's there for freedom of expression. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that he should be defining it that way. I think he could have came up with a better or an alternative definition to explain those gatherings historically, because that's what they were talking about, what the church meant historically to Black folks.
a community significantly found within the church for the Black community. Like you said, education and music. There was a lot of belief, especially with what was happening during the slavery time. There was a lot of unity that brought people together and brought them hope in worshiping together and glorifying the Lord through that. So I believe that it definitely has shaped the Black churches and the Black community today.
Yes, the Black church has played a pivotal role into our time here in the United States as Black people. But the Black church, I believe, doesn't define us as Black people. Is it necessarily the greatest thing for us? I definitely don't believe that.
Well, I would piggyback off of that because the Black church, as we understand it within our context, is one thing. But what we forget is that Black people and Black Christians are not a monolith. So, for instance, there are 45,000 plus Christian denominations. I happen to be a Roman Catholic. However, I do have family that are a part of the Black church. Yes. So I think that it definitely does have its extent, but it's not all encompassing, as you've pointed out as well.
I'm curious, would you say the same thing about Black atheists as not a monolith?
Well, of course. I mean, I think whenever you paint anyone as a monolith, you've already shut down all kinds of conversation. So there's many reasons why someone may choose. It sounds like you guys might have grown up in the Black church or been at least exposed to it. There are many reasons why someone chooses to leave, and they're not all the same.
I'm curious, what is that distinction for you two?
Well, I'm a Black atheist and I'm an agnostic atheist, meaning that, maybe there's something out there, but most likely there's probably not a Jesus or Jesus up in the sky or Jesus coming back or anything like that that's going to come and save us.
Me personally, I study a sector of African spirituality, right? The way that I happened to stumble upon that, I started to ask myself questions like, who do my ancestors worship, right? What is the point of religion in general? How to proliferate around globally, right? And doing research, you start to see that Christianity became synonymous with white supremacy around the 4th century with Constantine, the emperor, right? In which they made it the Roman national religion. If you refuse to adhere to his Christian rule, then you would be beheaded. So I think that historically speaking, Christianity has been used to oppress and enslave a lot of people globally.
I think it's great that you take it that far back, but I think you have to really separate theology from Black theologies for the sake of conversation. Because I think that when I talk to a lot of atheists and agnostics, we speak from the vacuum of Black experience, and we already understand. In America, number one, that's troubled water, right? Globally, it's also troubled water. I think a broad blanket would cover that it's suppressed people of color. We don't see ourselves in scripture. We don't see ourselves being, told. And when we did, when we were learning these stories in church back in slave times, we were told that our God wanted us to be slaves. So that very thing was utilized to suppress us. For heaven's sakes, the KKK came out of the church, right? So we do have a problem, and we can't just say the church is the end all to be all. It's a complicated conversation.
With that said, let me just
totally disagree with everything that he just said. Almost everything he just said, I totally disagree with. We do see ourselves in scripture. We do. There's actual words and definitions right inside of the book. Maybe it's just not in the part that you read, but we do see ourselves in scripture. And I personally know that for a fact. So as much as he said, still no points coming from him on the Black Christian side.
put a pin on that. Let's get to the 3 gears and.
Yes, so I disagree that the Black church has shaped Black culture, especially as in the affirmative entirely. Because what that does is it ignores our ancestors before the transatlantic slave trade. It ignores the fact that they had their own cultural beliefs and that there were many contributions that Black folks have made to this.
None of which exists today. There's a church on every corner in neighborhoods that are relatively African American. There's a church somewhere near, not far. They don't have to go far. Some are in walking distance. So the things that the ancestors came over here with were lost somewhere to where they picked up an entirely new religion, or new practice, I should say, of worship somewhere along the line. Proof of that is the many denominations and the many churches that's out here today. So no points for her.
Country that were not centered in Christianity. When we think about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was the founder of Negro History Week, who was Harvard educated, who had deep criticisms of the Black church, his roots were in free thought and criticism. Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote A Raisin in the Sun, Zora Neale Hurston, the famous author, and other Black folks who were not religious at all. Just because it is prevalent does not mean that it has entirely shaped our communities for the better. And I think that we have to be mindful of the diversity that has been within our communities that has not always been rooted in Christian and religious faith. Our communities have ignored the non-religious, atheist, and humanist presence for far too long, simply because there is a prevalence of Christianity in our communities.
I actually agree with you.
I actually partly agree with her also, because just because they weren't Christian didn't mean they didn't believe. It didn't mean that they didn't practice something. They just were not practicing Christianity. So they could have believed in something. It just wasn't what we know as Christianity today. It may have been called something else. It could have been similar in practice, but definitely was not the same. Definitely was not the same.
Because I don't think Christianity is supposed to take hold of somebody's culture and completely, like, you know, change it into something completely different. I think
agree.
that Christianity welcomes different cultures. I think that true biblical Christianity looks at somebody in a different culture and says, hey, even though you're of this culture, even though you believe in different things or whatever, you can still be welcomed in the kingdom of God. You know.
Well, I find that very interesting because, as someone previously said, there are, 45,000 denominations of Christianity, some that might be more welcoming and some that are totally damning.
Right.
And we're talking about the same book. We're talking about the same text that has been interpreted.
I just told you guys that. She made some good points. I told you. You got a lot of she said 45,000 different denominations coming out of one book. Remember, it's all about your interpretation. And there's no private interpretation of the book. So this thing is coming from somewhere. If it's no private interpretations of the book, how are you receiving it to be coming up with 45,000 different denominations? That can become dangerous. So that means that somebody is not interpreting the book correctly to come up with that many different denominations. Somebody's not understanding is not there. So she's making some good points right now.
Some for that has been used in the positive, and some that has definitely been used to enslave our ancestors, disenfranchise our communities, and also look at things through a lens that has demoralized us. So we cannot ignore that as far as historically.
I want to speak to something, going back to something that you had said about your belief systems now within the African spirituality and stuff like that, which I think is wonderful, actually. And I don't think it's actually too far from some of the things that we might believe, as Christians, right? But there is a constantly erroneous thought that Constantine came and did all of these things. Christians were being persecuted in Rome and throughout, the Middle East far before Constantine, right? And then that doesn't, if we're going to talk about the roots of Christianity, how do you explain the Tawahedo Church, the Ethiopian Tawahedo?
She's saying a lot right now, people. When we pause the video, I have something to tell you. Now, far before Constantine, they weren't known as Christians. They were known as something else. And prior to that, it was called the Nazarene sect. So we have some issues here with what she's saying. They weren't called Christians prior to that. You're calling them Christians. So she just put a definition on a people prior to Constantine that wasn't even their proper label. So Christians is Greek. It's Greek. That term and that definition came along with the Greek. So I know she's trying to make a valid point here, but that's not going to stick. Let's go.
The Halo Church, which was never anything that was forced upon the Ethiopian people. In fact, in the Bible, you have in Acts where an Ethiopian was baptized and went to spread the gospel to all the people. Where do you think he went as an Ethiopian? You know, so there are roots of Christianity which are far beyond this conquering of Constantine and all that stuff. But what I will say in complete agreement with all of you, with everyone here, is that Christianity as a whole has been abused. It has been taken. It has been used to demoralize. Just because there are people who are infiltrators, just there are people who will use the word God against us as people, it does not invalidate what he said and what he taught. This narrative of Christianity is the white man's religion. Jesus Christ wasn't white. I mean, that's just a fact.
To respond to that, I think that my point was that in the 4th century, it became synonymous with white supremacy, right? So it did not spawn, right? So Christianity, as you said, was actually in Africa, right? But I believe that today, I believe that Black Christians, and of course, I'm not here to disrespect any of you guys, but I believe that the modern iteration of Christianity, right, spawning from the Judeo-Christian belief system, has forced Black Christians to speak a lot of multiculturalism, to put the idea of unity above the idea of Blackness, right? And when you put unity above Blackness, we are the ones who suffer in America. So I feel like a lot of Black Christians, they don't want to talk about the history of Christianity. I believe that they want.
He's saying a lot right now, but I have to let him know that you're not on this planet alone. So Blackness is not the world's top priority. The message is. This is why we're all different down here on this planet. This is why we have so many different cultures. This is why we have so many different nationalities. Because we're all different. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all put our pants on the same. We all stand up and walk and talk. We can see, we can feel, we can touch. So me trying to put my Blackness above everybody else's endeavor is an injustice to everybody else. Because I don't want to feel as though that I'm better than anybody else. I don't want to feel as though I'm better than you just because you're of another race. I don't want anybody feeling as though they're better than me because they're of another race. I don't want it. I don't want it. So
to
let's
ignore a
go.
lot of facts when it comes to Christianity. I believe that they don't want to look at it as a whole, right? So I do believe that a lot of problems do occur from this.
Can you explain that a little bit further, that difference between the multicultural unity and not putting Blackness ahead of it?
I'm so glad you asked that, Jay.
Yeah, let's go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the George Floyd protests are a perfect example to look at. Tons of unity when George Floyd died. 2021, record police killings. 2022, record police killings. 2023, record police killings. When people join our fight, love everybody, be humanitarian. When people join our fight, it tends to become about unity, and it tends to become about how not racist America is. And Black issues and Black politics tend to get washed away. So I have a lot of Black Christians who say, let's accept everybody. Jesus told us to turn the other cheek, but they are killing us, bro. The world, like globally, Africans are being oppressed. It's not a joke.
You're making a face.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I made a lot of faces, but I mean, it's really good stuff, and I don't even know where to go back and address some of it. It's really good stuff. So theology, right, just in a broad sense, is usually defined by either one referring to nature, experiences, tradition, and maybe scripture, right? Just on a broad sense. It could be broken down even further. So I think that when we come to a place as Black folks, we come and we lean heavily into our experience. right? And if all of these different sources are places where we would lean, then our pillars are a little bit out of balance if it's solely based upon what we've been through. Right? So I think that we have to be a little bit more balanced. When you said that the church hasn't impacted culture, I think the church has not impacted what we bring to church. We still hand clap, toe tap, dance, shout, run, throw wigs and everything else when you go to certain churches, right? Because Black culture expresses itself a certain way. What it has done to us, and I agree to your point, is it has limited our free thought. Right? Because we have learned to come to church and check our minds at the door and just do church the way it does, the way it goes. And if you don't get happy and shout, you ain't been to church, you ain't seen God.
Yeah, so when you described theology, you left out one word, which is evidence. When we think about the rules of how we learn, how we train, how we educate ourselves, in theology, especially within the Black church and Black theology, we are dismissing evidence. Where is the proof?
Well, I think
Going back to the prompt,
She tried to make a point there, didn't she? But she left out one word also, which is called faith. And what's the definition of faith? What's the definition of faith, people? What's the definition of faith? Go look it up. Go look it up. Look up the definition of faith because she left it out. I'll give it to you at the end of this broadcast, but she left it out. I'll give it to you. I'm not going to give it to you right now, but I know she tried to make a point, and the reason I'm holding on to it is because it may come up again in this debate. So she left out something also. She wants evidence, right? Remember that word. Evidence. Let's go.
the idea that the church really shaped the Black culture is really community did, because we didn't have spaces. So the only space that we could exist in with any kind of freedom or away from watchful eyes was being able to worship and practice. That's why we melded a lot of the practices that we had, especially in African religious traditions, to Christianity, so that we could continue worshiping and having these different traditions continue throughout our community. So Black people have always survived and continue to advance and evolve through sticking together. Church just happened to be the place where we could kind of do that without having other people in our business.
It was functional.
Let's move on to the next prompt.
We all possess the capacity for compassion and connection, and real connection starts with real understanding. For example, Pew Research found more Americans are religiously unaffiliated. Just by reading the story's summary, I learned how researchers are predicting a significant decline in institutional religion. They also listed out a Pew study, so I can compare the research with how different media outlets chose to frame it. And swiping through these articles, I can read up on what this means for the separation of church and state, and even how Black millennials who leave church don't necessarily give up on faith. Most importantly, I can compare how the news interpreted this research with Pew's own report. This especially is great when it's about something as personal as spirituality, which is why we were so excited to partner with Ground News. Their platform is designed to show you perspectives that you might be missing. The why, not just the what, making common ground so much easier to find. They're really great at contextualizing stories full of layers with information like a source's political lean, how reliable they are, and who owns them.
I also like that I can follow both Christianity and atheism interest pages to see stories I really care about.
And their blind spot feed is built to make sure that I'm not stuck in my own echo chamber, and I can step into someone else's news reality, making understanding their point of view so much easier to do. Click the link in the description and check out ground.news/Jubilee to get 40% off the Vantage plan. That's $5 a month for unlimited access to the blind spot feed, which is cheaper than my daily coffee run. Thanks again to Ground News for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
As a Black person, people always assume that I'm Christian.
That's really funny.
It's like, oh, God bless you, have a great day. And I'm like, oh, bless your heart. No, just keep your religion to yourself. It's just a lack of your own personal bubble, right? You're in your own space. You are thinking that everyone is thinking in accordance to the way that you are. So you need to start expanding your bubble by asking questions, engaging in conversation, and then allowing other people to come in and have a conversation with you as well.
So I live in the Bible Belt. in Atlanta, Georgia. And I often get that I look familiar, that I have a familiar face, and especially from other Black women. And almost the follow-up question is, have I seen you in church? Because that's where I spend all my time. And one of the number one questions in the South is, what church do you go to? Not even that whether you're a believer or not, it is the default is, what church do you go to? And that is because, even according to research, the majority of the Black community is Christian and religious, especially in areas of the South where Christianity is extremely prevalent, and that's all that is within their circle, like you said, the bubble. So it is assumed that everyone thinks the same.
Yeah, to add to that, my father is actually a pastor in Texas right now in the Bible Belt. And whenever I just converse with a Black person, it's always, God bless you. Oh, I'll pray for you. It's always it's always a religious undertone under our conversations. I just don't tell people I'm atheist right away, just so I can just keep the peace, because there's just a good 90% of us are religious, not even Christians, Muslims, or things like that. And when I say I'm an atheist or something like that, some people shun me. They'll just say, "Oh, I'll pray for you," or I feel bad for you, kind of vibe sometimes. And
So do you get that mostly in between Black people, or other races say that to you as well?
It's majority
Mostly
black people.
Yes, mostly Black
Do you
people.
guys find it like an offensive stereotype, or is it more so just like?
Well, I think that it goes back to the last question, and it goes back to how the Black church has shaped our culture, right? I believe that during the Civil Rights era, of course, you had almost every single civil rights leader being Christian. There's tons of gospel music in the hip hop.
Yeah.
Kanye, Chance the Rapper, you know what I'm saying? They're constantly sampling it. So I think that within Black culture, you kind of cannot escape it.
Take this guy right here.
Good point.
I think the reason why I answered no to this question is not necessarily because of who I am, but where I'm at. Because I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I'll be outside a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll be at a bar with some of my friends. Like this past year, I went to a pride parade. You know, I've been to clubs to dance and hang out with some of my friends. And they don't really assume that I'm Christian because I'm in some of those environments. But even though I'm there, that doesn't.
Absolutely. They wouldn't think that you're a Christian because you're in those environments, because some of the places you're in are not supported biblically. So why would they? Why would they? See, if now I'm listening to this guy right here. Now, if he was talking, he would be talking to people that would not really know some scriptures. So if you wouldn't know some scriptures, you would be listening to him and thinking that what he's saying is completely accurate. No, the places that you're talking about, you're frequenting, are places that you know biblically. They know that you're not supposed to be being unevenly yoked with non-believers, or if you're a Christian, you know you're not supposed to be in places that are quote unquote Sodom and Gomorrah. You're not supposed to be in places like that, because what happened to places like that? They were destroyed biblically. So yes, so you're not making any points right now. You're not making any sense right now. This is why the Scoreboard Keepers is here, because we listen. We're listening intently. So yes, you may have gotten that over on the average listener, but you can't get that over on us, because we know a little bit of the scriptures. You're frequenting places that are not biblically sound, and technically, if you're following the biblical message, you wouldn't be there. Not celebrating it, you would be there for other reasons. Let's go. No points.
Doesn't mean that I'm less Christian or more Christian or more holier than thou. I'm just in the world, but. Yeah.
But again, we talked about, and I mean, not to bring off what happened on camera, but when we introduced ourselves, you said amen.
I did.
That assumed that perhaps that we were going to be in agreement with that. I mean, even though there were Christians and atheists in the room, even whether it is explicitly Christianity or some form of belief in itself, it is often, more often than not, assumed that as Black folks, that we all share some form of belief in some sort of deity.
Can I say something to
So,
you?
sure.
What was your name again?
Mandisa.
Mandisa. Beautiful name, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna say this, like, that has less to do about my assumptions about you and just more about the way that I personally talk. So, like, even if I'm, like, around, like, an atheist or whatever, like, it's not really a personal thing or an assumption for me to be like, amen, because that's just how I talk, you know what I'm saying? If I have a Muslim friend who's around me and they wanna say, mashallah, I don't think that they're trying to offend me just because they have a different religious belief than me.
I say amen.
Yeah, but when you're just talking like that, it has to have some kind of substance behind it, right? There's supposed to be power in the word. So if you're saying you just talk like that, what do you mean? You just going through the motions? Is it an act? Or do you mean what you're saying? Because when you say that, that means when you say Aman, it means that you're in agreement. That's what you're doing. You're saying that I agree. I concur. No points for you. Now, like I said, to somebody that didn't know that, you would have thought that he was saying something that was that would qualify him to be putting some points on the board. But he really wasn't. And what he was saying was quite contrary to where he almost got a point taken away, because he's saying something up there, you know, he didn't go long enough for me to deduct the point. But just because you're saying that's the way I talk, you're actually saying that you're not saying it for the power that's actually behind the reason for using it. You're just saying that that's just the way I talk. We pay attention up here. Let's go.
And a whole lot. So I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah.
But it isn't a thing to say like, God bless you. Amen simply means I agree, or we are in agreement, right? It isn't necessarily.
Wow. He really just came right behind me and said it. Roxy really just came behind me and said it. And look at his face, guys. Look at his face. Wow. Okay. At least I didn't think she was going to say it, but I said it before she said it.
Necessarily mean God, this, that, the other. So to me, it's like if I agree with something, it's like, yeah, amen, whatever. But it's not to offend, to say, oh, we're all Christians and this, that, the other. That's just the way I speak.
But should that now prompt you to think about why it is that we do what we do? Why not, though? I mean, if you're in community with other people and they may not share the same practices or they may not share the same customs as you do, is it possible to perhaps think that might not be the most appropriate thing to say at the time?
No, because
No, and no, she wasn't getting any points for that, because it's not saying that word is not a practice. It's a different language. Saying that word is not a practice. It's a different language. Do you understand that? It has nothing to do with practice. It has to do with language. Good question, good try, Mandisa, but no points.
Because we live in a culture that is very much about relativism and your relative truth and being who you are and standing in that. And what you're asking me to do is not stand on who I am. It's not about personifying what someone says that's just a greeting or passing or a statement of agreement. It's not wrapped in that. And if everyone else in this culture gets to stand in their relative truth, be who they want to be, say who you are, that I should be able to do that too without thinking that I'm offending someone.
But we're really not. As Americans, yes, we're Black Americans, but they don't really want any of us to have individuality. Ultimately, it's like, get up, go to work, do your labor, come home, don't question anything.
2024, why would you be living in that reality though of oppression? It's 2024.
Because so many people are still oppressed.
But that's a mindset thing, right? Because
No, it's not.
I wouldn't say that any of us with our strong personalities, each one of us on this stage, live in a mindset of, I feel so oppressed today because I'm Black. What I'm going to do? I'm Black today. No, we get up and we're going to do what we have to do. We're going to go for what we want, regardless of our spiritual beliefs. I don't think that that's an argument to stand on.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but are you saying that?
I agree with her. But, and the reason I gave her that point is because I do agree with what she said. But I'm just waiting for somebody on the other side to say that it's systemic, because it could be a touch of systemic there. Systematic. It could be systematic. You can't ignore it because you can't see it. It's a possibility that it is there. And remember what Mandisa said earlier that I told you I was going to tell you at the end, that's about evidence. So, right, you may not have the evidence, but that does not mean it's not there. Remember I said that, people.
It's like a victim mentality.
I do.
Yeah.
Do you involve yourself in the Black Power movement?
What do you mean by that, though?
Do you involve yourself in the Black Power movement?
What does that mean? Because
Well,
there are
essentially,
issues.
do you prioritize Black politics and the Black community?
I prioritize politics that I believe in.
Okay, so that's
why
why you feel that way. That's why
not
you feel
really,
like it's a
because
victim
there are
mindset.
Black politicians that I agree with in
No.
anything. You cannot diminish what I'm saying on that.
No.
You can't agree with a politician just because they're Black. I didn't agree with Kamala Harris. I didn't agree with her. I wasn't going to agree with her just because she was Black, but I also didn't agree with Donald Trump. So you can't just do that. Let me just tell y'all something out there. Let me just tell y'all something. Let me tell you politicians something out there, and all you political people. If you follow politics heavy, you've been following this presidential debate and so on and so forth. For me personally, and I'm not ashamed to say this at all, that I have no clue why there hasn't been a law put into place that anybody running for president, anybody, I mean, this is a prerequisite. I'm starting with this. If they were to make me in charge of changing any law that has to do with these politics right today, the minute after they give me the power, I'm putting this into play. That anybody running for president has to have been in the military for at least one term, a minimal of one term. If you haven't served in the military, you should not be the chief and commander of this land. Minimal one term. I'm saying minimal one term. That's just me, though. Let's go.
No. I'm not diminishing what you're saying, right? But you said something objectively, right? You said that is a victim mindset, and it's not. And if you educate yourself on the Black Power movement and what is going on with Africans globally, you wouldn't have that mindset, right? I think that I actually wanted to bring the conversation to a little bit of a personal experience. I remember a time when I was in 8th grade, I was speaking to my social studies teacher. His name was Mr. Fada, and I told him I was Christian, and he was like, oh, that's cool. What kind of Christian are you? And I was like, Baptist? I got baptized. Am I a Baptist? And he was like, you know what, Tyler? You're probably one of the loud ones, right? And then I was like, what do you mean? We are loud. No, I know. I accepted that immediately. And that was kind of one of my first interactions with microaggressions, right? And religious microaggressions, right? And I think that the parallels between how toxic it can get when you come across other Christians, even in the Black community, is the same way, right? I feel like I can tell a beautiful Black person who just became my friend that I missed the bus or my phone is off, and they're like, the devil's after you, pray. And it's like, bro, no, I missed my paycheck.
How do you?
It's like, what are we talking about here? And a lot of family members hit me up, and they're like, yo, Tyler, I need your help. The devil's after me. And after we breathe and we calm down, it's like if we put these problems on paper, it has nothing to do with spirituality at all. It has to do a lot with preparation, right? Mindfulness, right? And just financial planning.
I want to go back to something real quick. And that's, again, it's these narratives, right? Where you ask me, do you believe in the Black empowerment movement? It's such a broad thing because you still have not told me anything specific, even though that was beautiful what you shared. You are painting every Black person as a monolith.
No, I'm not.
Yes, when you ask those questions, because I, as a Black person, I'm expected to vote a certain way because I'm a woman. I'm expected to believe a certain thing, and it gives no room, and it denigrates each of us as an individual and what we think. And I think that's where the problem is. It's like I can care about Black issues, but we may not care about the same exact things or see things differently. But it doesn't make me any less Black than you.
What was your name?
Roxy.
Roxy, let me ask you a question, Roxy, right? Because you articulate yourself very well, and I'm not here to make you qualify your Blackness or to question for, your Blackness. That's not what I'm here at all, right? So, when do you think that the concept of Blackness first came into the minds of African people?
I'm not here for that kind of discussion because that's not my expertise.
Okay, perfect.
Hold on.
Perfect.
Do you want to answer? You don't want to answer?
You don't want to answer.
I don't want to answer.
And that's also another problem I have with.
That's a horrible question. You know why? Because the ancestors wasn't thinking about Blackness; they was thinking about culture. The ancestors, they were thinking about culture. My God, it was about the culture, not the skin color. It was about how they all worked together in unification. It wasn't about their skin color. You could have been purple. If you came within that group, you had to function a certain way. Not because of the skin. I almost took a point away from you, man. I almost did.
Christians, when it comes to free thinking,
it's
like a lot of ducking and dodging. But let me answer that from my perspective, right?
Please.
So the first time that this concept of unity through Blackness, I believe, proliferated through Africans' minds was when diverse Africans from West Africa were shackled together on slave ships and they couldn't speak to each other.
Yeah.
Right? They could not speak to each other. Right? But there were things that they noticed, right? And what they noticed is our hair is a certain way and our skin color is a certain way. Right? The people who are doing this to us, their skin color is a different way. So when they couldn't speak and they had no cultural relevance was when Blackness became important and was when Black people needed to put Blackness above everything else. I personally believe.
You know what? See, he was heading down that hole, right? He was heading down that rabbit hole. He didn't stop. And I'm taking a point away because listen, nothing supersedes the culture. The culture is what keeps a lot of nations alive today. It's because of the culture. Even right now, you're in a different culture. You're experiencing a different culture, not indigenous to where you're originally from. So the culture is different everywhere you go. Italian culture is different. German culture is different. Russian culture is different. Poland culture is different. Hungarian culture is different. Israeli culture is different. Iran's culture is different. It's about the culture. They're not looking at the skin. They're not looking at the skin. Only you are. The culture of your people is what supersedes everything. That's the lifeline of a people. Is your culture, and can it sustain the test of time? If not, we have a lot of lost cultures out here. We have a lot of lost cultures out here of people that we never seen before. Lost civilizations of people that we never seen before. We don't even know what they look like, but their culture is gone. I knew you would be the first one to get a point deducted.
That Black people all around the world, when it comes to intersectionality, I believe that they need to put race before anything else. You predate Jesus. You predate Muhammad. You predate, as an African woman, every biblical figure that walked this earth. Right? So what's more of a divine command? You being Black or you being Christian? And here's where I get upset, right? Because we talk about how, I don't want to be a part of this Black culture movement, this, that, and the third, and all these different things.
Mandisa is ready for you to be quiet. Mandisa, your own partner is ready for you to be quiet because you're over talking everybody and you're saying a lot of nothing and you're imposing your thoughts on everybody else. And you're being accusatory. But I got a feeling Mandisa wants you to be quiet. I think she wants you to be quiet.
things and I want to explore my own experience as a black person and da 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 da. And then you go to church, black church, and then there's white Jesus all over the wall.
Yep.
Right? And then you talk to black people and be like, what color is God? Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what color God is, right? But it does matter if you are a woman or a man of the cloth. How does that not matter to your book?
Because
in the
here's
Bible,
let's
let me ask you
interject.
something.
Let's
In the
interject.
Bible, let me finish this off with this, right? Okay. In the Bible, is Jesus, is his appearance in the Bible?
I believe they describe him with like
Feet were bronze and hair was, yeah.
His feet was black as brass and his hair was that of wool. James Harden? James Harden? LeBron? What? James Harden is in the Bible?
The black church is better than the white church.
Join our Middle Ground Patreon to watch this exclusive prompt.
The church has helped black people more than the government. You hesitate a little bit.
Totally, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Because it's like a two-headed sword, right? Because church is someplace that we can go, gather. It is very helpful to the community in the sense of we can be there together. We can have conversations with one another. At one point during slavery, it may be the only place you can see your family or connect with one another. A lot of churches can help build different programs within the community. But I think, again, it comes back to that word of like wanting to assemble someplace, wanting to be with people that look like you. And a lot of the church movement did have to force the government's hand of like, all right, we need civil rights. So that was kind of birthed and, pushed through in that way. So no, I don't trust the government, and I don't think the government is here to help black people. I don't think the government is here to help really any poor people. And a lot of black people, unfortunately, are disenfranchised, so.
This is interesting that all the atheists.
This is amazing that they keep using this term church. Okay. They keep using this term church. Okay. We have to get something, set something straight right now. The term church just means gathering. It's not a building. It's not a building. It's not wood and stone. If 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he's in the midst. That's church. You guys are having church right now. Church is going on right now, and they don't even know it. So no points for you. And it's not going to be any points for anybody else that keeps misunderstanding that. Church is not built with wood or stone. It is the gathering of the people in the Most High God's name.
Step forward for
So
this.
I go back to history after slavery and Reconstruction, right? So after slavery, there were blacks in Congress. There was black progress. However, once Reconstruction ended, and there were racist people that were brought in power to disfranchise black folks. There were many churches in the religious community that helped support in times when black folks couldn't get good jobs, who could not get a good education, even though there were historically black colleges and universities. I do tend to give the church its credit at times, and again, that doesn't mean the black church gets to define the black community in its entirety, and that it should define all of us that way. But we have to give credit historically where it's due.
The U.S. government has had a lot of policies to keep African Americans down for the past, ever since after slavery and even before. So we also had redlining, which kept black communities poor and away from certain jobs in the inner city, white flight, all these things, all these were perpetrated and supported by the U.S. government in every single major city in the United States. But the one place that where black people we can come and congregate was the church. It was kind of a de facto
and
place.
Get information.
And get information.
Yes.
So my question to all of you guys as atheists who stood up for this one
For sure.
is, do you guys view it as more of a lesser than two evil situation where you guys just really distrust the government? So why you guys have created this prompt? How would you answer that?
Oh.
See, even the way that you worded the question, the lesser of two evils, because evil is a word that gets really
I meant that in just like a phrase.
No, I know, but I'm just saying the underlying tones of just like the American community, and therefore it's projecting its domination throughout the world, right?
Let's say the lesser of two entities in this instance.
Sure.
The church itself, it's about what it doesn't do. It's not about how it hurts the community. It's about what it doesn't do, not what it does do, right? So I think that with the government, for every new deal that you get a war on drugs. For every welfare system that's implemented, we get cracks and gun in our community.
Yeah.
Right. So I believe that when it comes, I believe that the Black church historically has given us jobs, organized our movements. Without the Black church, we would not be here today. Let's get that straight.
Yeah.
Right. They were very important, but today they don't have the same value historically. And the government, just after the George Floyd protests, the two major bills that were passed, even though they passed 1,000 oversight bills for police brutality, the main bills that they passed was, I believe, an Asian hate bill and an LGBTQ hate bill. So I don't think that the government is necessarily, I believe that it's too overstretched.
And also, let's take it to the reparations discussion.
Yeah.
About how there were supposed to be reparations after slavery.
I still want my
40 acres and a mule.
40 acres and a mule.
Give me my 40 acres and a mule.
And that was thwarted through the U.S. government. So we can definitely even point to that. And we are still having this discourse about reparations and economic justice that we shouldn't be having now, that the federal government could have resolved a long time ago.
Let's hold. Let's bring the disagreeers. Would anyone like to start?
Yeah, I'm a little bit neutral when it comes to this standpoint because I feel that there was a lot of redlining. You brought up such a great point. When I was exposed to the amount of redlining that the government had imposed on Black communities, minority communities, especially what's happening up in San Francisco right now, up in New York, it was bizarre. And that had pushed a lot of Christian churches, a lot of churches in general, to open up assistant living, open up food shelters and home shelters for assisting in people that the government wasn't doing. But at the same time, the church was also pushing this on the government, on their local legislators and their mayors to also make movements and propositions to do that. So it's kind of like this fine line between both. I don't trust the government. I don't trust also completely like people who run the church because they're not all good people. They're not all good people who we elect as well into our branches and legislator governments and stuff. So there's just this neutrality that I'm sit between with because is it really going to benefit, or are these just propositions to just temporarily save someone's butt and then go on to the next and then just continue?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a low-scoring game. You know why? Because on the Christian side, on the Black Christian side, it's a lot of talking, but they won't stand on anything. They're moving around and they're bouncing around, but they won't stand on anything solid right now. The Black atheists have come out and admitted how they feel and their stance on everything. They've come out and said, basically, listen, I don't believe in a God. So that means that every time you ask them something now, they have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and they're standing on a solid foundation, even though they may not be right. But the Christians are bouncing around, they're changing terms, they're being really picky with this, that, and the third, and that comes with when you can't back up what you're saying. She just said a whole mouthful of things about she don't trust the government or the church that she goes to. So then what are you talking about? What are you talking about if that's the case? I mean, she ran off on her debate, on her information, but she really wasn't saying anything. Not anything that could put points on the board for her team. Nor has any of the Black Christians. So let's see where she goes.
To like put the Band-Aid on the big scar.
I ask myself, why didn't I walk up in favor of the church doing more? And at the risk of giving any ammo for the other side, no, at the risk, I think I look at the church with a very critical eye. I think that I'm troubled by what we do and what we don't do. I'm troubled by how we do some of the stuff that we do, and we miss the bigger pictures, right?
That's right.
And so for that reason, I had to just hold back and say, I don't think that we're doing all that we should be doing.
Sorry to interrupt, but what are some specific examples of that?
I think that we've gotten into this Western world mentality where church now is gimmicky. I think that it's about becoming so seeker friendly. and we play to certain audiences, we play to certain things. We code switch organizationally, if you can believe that. You can have a church over here where everybody is praying for healing, but everybody's broke. This church over here is a church of prosperity. This church over here is a church of tongue talking. So you've got these different characteristics that if there's...
See, people, now we have honesty coming out. So he's finding himself not being afraid to talk about their shortcomings, which puts points on the board here because you're making sense. I mean, prior to that, they had 11, 12 to 13 points on the board. And we're halfway into this debate. And that will make you a loser here. You have to be able to be honest with the people and tell them exactly what's going on, because people are seeking information. They're seeking truth. So it's very important that you be honest and upfront, and especially with those that know.
No balanced theological view of it. And so I think the church runs the risk of showing up impotent in some of the conversations that we need to have.
How much money does your church make a year? This is important. How much money does your church make a year?
I don't have that number at the top of my mind. I wasn't coming to talk about the budget.
Okay. Okay.
Tyler Burns. See? You asked him a question, he gave you a direct answer, and you backed down. He said, I didn't come here to talk about the budget. So guess what, Tyler Burns? You have a lot of questions. You've been asking a lot of questions. You've been jumping in and speaking out of turn and asking things not relevant to the topic. And here on Scoreboard Keepers, we hold you accountable for that. So I want you to take a look at the scoreboard and see what you've done for your team. The deduction of a point for not having any decorum and speaking out of turn and asking something that didn't have anything to do with what the people were talking about. Because now you have people, you're taking, people were paying attention to the topic that was at hand. And you asked them something completely off the grid. The budget's not on topic right now. Stay on topic.
That's very important. The reason why I bring it up is because we're talking about what the black community, what the black church does for the community, right? And if you are taking money from the black participants who go to your church, you should know how much money you're taking from the community, especially since the community isn't financially stable. Yeah. But also churches that make over $100,000 per year should do exactly what the black church used to do during the civil rights era.
I think that's a harsh criticism.
You see what I'm saying, people? You see what I'm saying? Now he's telling the churches on how they should be spending their money with the budget, with no plan. He's saying he thinks that this is what they should do.
I think it's a huge assumption.
Wait, hold on. Finish. So churches that do make over $150,000 a year, they need to invest that money in the black institutions.
Yeah. With all due respect, $150,000.
I do want to hear from his response. How would you respond?
You can start a bank with that.
How would you respond?
I think we have to be careful about drawing assumptions of what churches do. I was making a very broad commentary about how I see churches behave, but don't get me wrong. There are a lot of churches that are doing exactly what you just said they should be doing.
Turkeys and shoes aren't enough for our community.
Well, see, I can't get into that part of it because turkeys and shoes are not the conversation I'm having. I'm having a conversation about a methodology to reach a people and be a service to a community. I'm talking about down payment assistance so that black folks can own homes. I'm talking about doing financial stewardship education courses. I'm talking about, counseling and support systems for family and standing in the gap for mothers with the single mothers with children and making sure that they have mentors for their sons and their daughters. I'm talking about programs that actually affect folks' lives. But meanwhile, you're on a different page, and I get that, but I wouldn't brush that very broad.
Dan is cooking right now, people. He done brung his team back. He was quiet at first, but he in a zone right now. And Tyler Burns on the other side, you're responsible for losing the lead for your team.
Because there are a lot of ministries that are doing it. What I'm looking at is the impact of the way this division amongst the body of Christ actually shows up in the world. I think it shows up a little bit less impotent than it should. And on behalf of the body of Christ, I apologize that you've seen that more than you've seen the effective work.
Is that fair?
No. No, it's not fair. And once again, when you dive into this with Christians, I often feel that there's this neglect for politics. Jesus was a fighter. Jesus was a fighter. He was not
anti-capitalist.
He was not pacifist. He was anti-capitalist, right? So while what you're saying is very good, and I respect the fact that you are a leader, right, and that you do own your own black church, right? But there needs to be more. I don't want you just meeting with mothers, right? If my grandma is funding her own displacement every single time she donates to the church, and they put their money at Chase Bank.
Yeah.
You understand that, right?
I guess, like, what specifically would you like?
What's the more that you're looking for within the churches for the black community?
I need the church to put their race. I need all black Christians to put their race.
Tyler Burns, I want you to watch this. I want you to watch this scoreboard, Tyler Burns. How are you going to come up there with all type of accusations and then don't have a plan? They've asked you 4 and 5 times in what way, and all you came up with was complaints about. Now you're talking about what your grandmom did because she was tithe, because she was given tithe. We understand that. I understand that. I'm not even in support of that. I understand what you're talking about, but you're not backing it up with information. You're complaining. You're not backing it up with information. You're not talking about the pastor's salary. You're not talking about taxes. You're not talking about the programs they have. You're not talking about the choirs that they're buying. You're not talking about the cars that the pastor has. You're not talking about the electric bill in the building. You're not talking about the food they have that they're getting. I mean, you're not talking about any of these things. You're not talking about any of the functions where this money is going. And is it necessary on going there? You're not talking about is the new Bibles in the church. You're not talking about is it a new pulpit. You're not talking about is the heater running downstairs. You're not talking about the things that it takes to maintain the actual facility. But as I told you before, the church is not a building. It's not wood and stone. It's the gathering. And church can be held anywhere. So you're responsible. Once again, Mandisa is looking at you right now as if she's not sure if you know what you're talking about. She's not sure. She wants you to give an answer, and then she looks like she wants to come in and rescue you, right? But she can't right now because you're doing so much talking and you're talking yourself into a hole, which has brought the Christians back on the black atheists. You literally have single-handedly put the Christians in the lead. Let's go.
Either on the same level or above Christianity politically, not socially, politically.
Yeah.
Right? We need to, as a pastor, you need to preach that the church needs institutions. Otherwise, every single time that our grandmas go and pay tithes, they are funding their own displacement.
How is that better than white supremacy, though, if you're asking us to be supremacists about being black people?
Who said anything?
Well, you brought up white supremacy.
Do you know what supremacy entails?
Yes, yeah, I know what you're about to say. I know what you're about to say. However, you have brought up white supremacy several times, but now you're saying put your blackness above everything. Black is the only way to think about it, and that is a supremacy in and of itself. Which I,
sister, yes, you do. And I want you to watch this. I want you to watch this screen. Since I want you to watch this screen simply because you called Tyler out on his BS, right? You called him out on it. This is the first time this has happened. Okay? This is the first time this has happened on this show, right? We're gonna have a point going one way and another point going in another direction at the very same time. You get a point, and he gets a deduction. You called him out on his nonsense because you're absolutely right. He's talking about white supremacy, yet he wants us to establish black supremacy. It's insane. That's because he really don't have an answer to what should really be going on. He wants to complain. And this is what happens when you let a person talk. And again, look at Mandisa's face. It's borderline disappointment. It's borderline disappointment the way she's looking at you right now, because she know you're doing a lot of talking. She know you're doing a lot of complaining, but she know you don't have all the answers. And what she's saying is, as your elder, you probably need to pass the torch over to Mandisa and let her talk. And let her talk. You should be riding off of her coattail, because you're responsible for some points being taken away right now, man. You're destroying your team right now and their movement.
I can respect your opinion on that, but I don't operate just because of my blackness. There's so much more to me as a human, a woman, and other things. An American, like there are things that are intersectional about me as a person in this world. That's not just everything has to be about my race. And I have a problem with that. Just that thought in general, that everything must be seen through the eyes of being black. And if you don't, you get your black card.
Well, I think what he's trying to say.
Let me answer it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I never told you to use your blackness to make anybody else feel inferior by the way of their race. So no, I'm not spreading black supremacy. And I find it often that racist white people and black people in the church love to call me racist, bro.
I'm not.
Love to call me racist and a supremacist.
Brother, black unity does not have to be black supremacy. And that's the problem with your thesis here, with your theory. You need to curtail your mission here. If you're trying to establish black unity, everybody would understand it. It's nothing wrong with having pride in your culture. Every culture does. That's what you're looking for. That's the thing you need to be trying to establish here, is the pride in the culture. The Puerto Ricans have Puerto Rican Day Parade for a reason. There's Italian festivals for a reason. There's African festivals for a reason. It's because these people have pride within their culture. They have pride within their culture. That's what they have. Pride within their culture. And you can have the same thing. It does not mean that you need to establish black supremacy to be over top of everybody else. Your culture stands for itself. It stands for itself. And that's why your message is coming across as complicated, because it sounds like black supremacy and not black unity.
I am not
What are you
the
trying to
church,
say?
though. That's the thing. I am not the
Wait, hold on.
church in the way that you're trying to label me.
Let him clarify.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that if you are a part of the Black Power movement and if you are conscious of what goes on in the black community, then there is no way in hell that you will put being gay over being black, you will put being a Christian over being black, you will put being a woman over being black. You can get disabled. You can get disabled. But that's about it. That's about it. There is no reason in the world.
Whose entire identity is on their sexuality and being gay as well. So what about that?
Tyler Burns. Black is the color inside a crayon box. Once again, it has to, the longer you talk, look at Mandisa's face, people. She's getting more and more disgusted because she knows that he's not coming across with a good message right now. And guess what? You're absolutely right, Mandisa, because look at the board. He's going backwards. The more he talks, he's trying, he has his hands together like he's praying, and he's going backwards because he's having a hard time dialoguing with people that are calling him on his BS. I hope he passed the torch.
You don't have a problem with that, because if they're not Christian, then it's okay to be gay and black, right?
It depends on how you align yourself politically. I just said you guys can be Christian. You guys can be Christian, but you need to prioritize blackness.
Isn't our existence more than our political stance?
That's force-fed to you, brother, to be ignorant.
No. It's my belief. It's well thought out. I believe that who I am as a person is very much more broader than what you're describing I should be. right? I think that I just do. Now, am I for the cause and the advancement of black folks? Absolutely.
How?
Globally.
How?
I'm not here to prove my blackness to you. I'm here to talk about, I'm talking about the difference, the chasm between you and I with a belief system. And what I'm saying is, while I respect you, you got to respect me for this conversation to be fluid.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I'm not challenging you or diminishing what you believe. I'm listening to you and I understand.
Mandisa is agreeing with the black Christians. And he's dropping points. Mandisa is sitting right next to him, agreeing with the black Christian. Unbelievable.
Understand your come from, but the only way we experience another culture is that we explore our commonalities. So I get your passion. I get your passion, and I definitely do the work in our community. And if you're suggesting that we should probably do other work, then let's have that conversation, because having a conversation that makes me feel like I need to surrender my black card is a conversation that gives us more of a chasm, so we never get there together.
Why in the
that
face
becomes
of
another schism.
pro-blackness? Why in the face of pro-blackness, everyone else's blackness feels diminished? That's insane to me.
No, because it's
what I'm saying is that a
of what you say.
portion of your energy and time needs to politically go into black institutions and black politics in order for us to get a foothold in the
Says you, but you're not an authority for me. You're not an authority
my
for
brother says
all black
political
folks.
science.
No, political science isn't my
Let's take a
authority.
step back, because I think we're getting too wrapped up actually in the black part of it right now. And I think ultimately I understand a lot of what you're saying, and you're specifically talking about capitalism, right?
No.
And how it affects black people in the world. No. Okay. So you are talking about putting blackness above everything else politically.
Do you guys feel like black people and Africans are oppressed globally?
Yeah.
And in America?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we all have that common belief, right? So systemically, right? The only way for us to beat systemic racism is for us to get institutions of our own, right? The only way for us to get out of this oppression, right, is for us to stop playing around with everyone else's beliefs and ideologies and focus on an Afrocentric belief. That's what I'm saying. You guys can do whatever you want, love everyone, be whatever type of intersectionality that you would like to be, right? But if you support Israel and Gaza, if you're putting that on your story, then I need you to put the Congo on there as well.
Yeah.
I need you to put Haiti on there as well.
Do you know how many black Catholics are being murdered by other black Africans in Nigeria right now?
Thank you. So let's talk about that.
But you haven't said anything about this. It's all about what's going on in the blackness. You're assuming that we don't think about these things. I think about these things. I know I'm highly aware of them. I'm highly sensitive. So it's not fair for you to say that just because we're black Christians or we're black American Christians or whatever, that we don't think about these things. We do. We might see things in a different way or a different, way of solution. But it doesn't mean that we're not there. We don't think it's important.
I just feel I just feel as black people in our community, we put an overly emphasis on Jesus and on the church. And in a lot of poor black communities, you'll see a bunch of churches, but you know what you won't see? You won't see a bank. You won't see a hospital. You won't even see a grocery store with good food. You go to a liquor store or something, there's an era behind the liquor store. There's people that don't look like us. These are issues that aren't even addressed by the church. It's sometimes I feel I go to a church, they don't even care sometimes.
That's not a church issue. That's not a church issue. That's a human issue. My guy, you don't have to drink alcohol. As a matter of fact, you don't have to shop in that store. That's not a church issue. And as a matter of fact, if you were to take it to the church, quote unquote church that you thinking of, which is the building, okay, and the structure, they would recommend you not to be drinking at all. Is the advice that I'm assuming that they would give you. So you're not making any points right now because that don't make sense. It's not the church's responsibility to get politically involved in trying to stop liquor stores from coming within the community in a capitalist society. As a matter of fact, if you go to a church, me knowing the church structures, I believe that they would tell you, instead of going to the liquor store, why don't you try coming down here for Bible study? Come on. Listen, stop. This is a comeback by the black Christians right now, thanks to Tyler Burns.
They just want more members, you know. And as a person who grew up in the black community and grew up in a black church, I understood these problems even when I was young, you know. So these are problems that us as black people need to come together and figure out and stop building so many churches in our communities. How many Ebenezer Baptist churches are there?
Right.
You know what
And
I'm
you're
saying?
right,
We don't
because
need that.
we need, if we're going to walk as Christians and have the black church, we should be helping the poor, we should be helping the orphans, we should be helping the widow, we should be helping the single mothers, we should be helping the disenfranchised, and that is a part of Christianity. And the fact that that is not happening, I totally agree that is a problem. So we are absolutely on the same page about that.
I have considered exploring other religions or leaving the church.
Well, I have left the church because I grew up in it. It wasn't for me. Especially once I became a high schooler, started hanging out with different crowds of people and seeing how different people live, expanding your bubble. And I had my first friend that identified as being LGBTQ, and my parents did not like that. Didn't want me hanging around this person, and it was strictly because they believed that because they were homosexual, they were going to lead me into a life of sin, and that person's going to die and go to hell and be punished just because of their lifestyle. And then I was already questioning, even when I was a little kid, things about the church. And because of that one fact, I was like, I can't keep doing this. I need to be somewhere where people feel accepted, because if it's something with homosexuality, then I could go to another church. It could be something with my blackness or being a woman or something else. There's always going to be some dividing factor. I also went through a lot of trauma. I lost 3 people that I loved all in a row. And the question kept coming up of, what does happen to us after we die? I don't just think that it's a heaven and a hell. There has to be something more than this. Yeah. And when I brought up these questions within the church, I was really shunned for it, pushed away, or people just didn't have an answer for me. And I began to see that fear even within my own parents, because they didn't want to question their belief. That's a cornerstone for them. That's their comfort.
I feel like for me, I've questioned leaving the church early on in my early years of faith. My parents went through a really nasty divorce, so much that it had scarred my mom, that she has walked away from religion in general. She has walked away from God and doesn't go to church. I think my brothers have seen that, and they are now grown young adults, and they don't believe in that as well. And there was a low point in my life where I tried to reach out to people, and I just wasn't getting the answers. I wasn't understanding my purpose and my reason in life, where I was second guessing my existence. Naturally, we are curious beings, and so I was just naturally diving deeper into my word, diving deeper into understanding, why am I going through what I'm going through? And is this something that I blame God, or is this something that is the free will and the sin that is just corrupted in humanity, that I have no control over? But there's still choices that I can make that can overcome the challenges that I'm going through. So that's personally with the church that I've experienced.
I left the Catholic Church. I left it. And what I didn't leave was a central belief in God. So I was more agnostic than I was Christian, Catholic.
That's what I was waiting to hear. That's why you saw, ladies and gentlemen, no points going up on the board for about 2 minutes. Because I was waiting for somebody else to say, okay, I didn't believe in the structure in the building, but it didn't stop me from believing in God. So it was, no matter what was being practiced inside of that building, it doesn't mean that God doesn't exist, because what was going on in that building could have been wrong. The message that was going on in that building, that could have been wrong. That's why when she approached with those questions, she couldn't get the right answer, or she said they just didn't have an answer for her, but somebody else could have. So basically, you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's go.
And the reason why I left it was because of the rhetoric that I constantly heard. I grew up in a protected bubble. Okay, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school. I went to Fordham University, a Jesuit Catholic college, right? But for me, it was more of that question of how dare you, as a Black person, believe in white Jesus. So for myself, okay, show me what you got. I went through Islam. I even went to the 5%ers, okay? Exactly. The Israelites, okay, gotcha. Buddhism, oh, okay. And I even went to the Black church because I figured if I'm gonna be Christian, I'm Black. Why are you a Catholic? Go to the Black church. So my favorite place to go outside of the Catholic church is West Angeles, honey. Okay, I'll be in there, that's my spot. But what changed for me? How did I get back to Catholicism? Well, we all believe in communion as Christians. That's something that we hold for ourselves. And when we had communion at West Angeles, this is where we have some divide between all of us, right, as Christians. The presence of Christ in the Eucharist is something that for me was a real thing that I cannot let go because of what he told us scripturally. So I think for me, my experience, even though I left, I was in apostasy for a while, I have an appreciation for whatever, and a respect for whatever it is that you feel you are called to, so.
Do you think this human experience of religion is due to the discomfort of death that humans have?
Yes.
Well, but for Christians, Christianity, we are not afraid of death. We look forward to death. I am looking forward to the day I die.
Girl, we scared. We scared.
Let me finish that. My father died. My father died the day before my birthday last year. It was a shock to me. But for me, I know where my father is as a man who believed in God to the day he died. He is with him. In my belief, he is with him. I will see him again. So.
I think as an atheist, I'm scared of the concept of death or like the process of dying because it is such an unknown. I try to spend more of my time thinking about what I'm doing while I'm alive so that when that time does come, one thing I've always said is that the only life after our deaths are the legacies we create while we're here. That's what lives on, whether it is good or bad. So, but yeah, the concept of death, or like the process, it still scares me.
I agree. What you do here will live on, but that doesn't mean that it's not anything afterwards either. So yeah, you're right.
I'm more curious.
I think that there's a reason for that. I don't think death is supposed to happen to us. As a Christian, all of us humans, we have this visceral reaction to it because that's not how things were supposed to be. If we go back to the garden and all those things, it's the sin nature of humanity, you know.
I have more of a curiosity and excitement for once it happens, because to me, this is hell. Like being a spirit stuck in a body on this planet with all these people being super decisive. I think the only reason they get me to come back down here is like, you can eat food again. You can go to Paris.
In a way that I think that there's a difference between saying like, I appreciate death and the concept of death and what it is, then saying like, I actually want to die. I feel like nobody wants to die. But we can still sit here and appreciate.
If you're in pain,
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I never really thought about joining another religion because I was born and raised in the church and very strict into the church. You know what I mean? Like I went to church every day. You know, Black church, you're there all day. It wasn't until I joined the military and I had a Black friend who was an atheist, and I've never met a Black atheist ever in my life. And he planted little seeds, and he was like, Darius, you were born and raised to believe this. This is all you know. You were beaten with this Bible and they tell you that it's the truth. You know what I'm saying? Even though there's really no evidence of God actually really existing. I started to think.
There's that word again, people. Remember it. Evidence. Evidence. They keep talking about it. Evidence. They keep mentioning it. Let's go. I'll tell you about it at the end.
About the concept of hell and good and evil. And I started to go through life situations and realize a lot of things aren't black and white at all.
No.
And you can devote your life to a God and go to church every Sunday and pray and do everything, and you can find something in heaven. That's a good, comforting thought. But the reality is there's no proof of any of it.
Blaise Pascal, I want to put a cherry on that.
Let him talk.
Me personally, I went to church until I was 14 years old.
twice a week, right? So every Sunday and every Wednesday, right? My ass was in the church, right? From very young, you know, from graduating from Sunday school to actually being around the adults and things like that. We've probably all gone through that process. Once I started to engage in free thinking, and once I got into my former teenage years around like 16, 17, and I was able to kind of get away from my family and get into being really into the Black Power struggle, right? And I found myself identifying with my community, right? And so when I realized Black Christians that I came across were more obsessed with people being gay in the church, was more obsessed with what the images of Jesus look like, and they had no time, essentially, for the things that I believe will help our community. And so I started to dive into different religions. The first religion I dove into was Islam, right? Because I remember going to Harlem and seeing Black Israelites on the street, right? And those were the first people who cultivated a sense of Blackness in me, right? And it wasn't embarrassing, but then I realized that there was a lot of toxicity.
Yeah.
So then I started to go to Eastern religions and things like that. And eventually I decided to connect my conscious being, right, with my mental being. That's what led me to African spirituality. And it was everything that I personally needed, right, in order for me to continue to engage with everyone like I love them. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of hate on the underside of religion.
So there is.
There's a saying, people. There's a quote. There's a scripture that says, "A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways." A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, and you gotta believe in something. You gotta believe in something. You can't be all over the place. And it sounds like Tyler has been all over the place. He's come in contact with many different things. Many. And it sounds like in there came confusion. In there came confusion. So I can understand and I can hear it within his dialogue. I can hear it within this dialogue that there's a lot of confusion going on there. Let's go.
Is a French philosopher. His name is Blaise Pascal, and he has something called Pascal's wager. And I think that you can relate to this regardless of your faith belief. He says that you can make the choice that it's for yourself, that it's better to believe in a God, that there's something, at least that there's something greater than this human condition. Because at the end of the day, what it's going to force us all to do is to look at each other as human beings, to serve mankind with kindness, with charity, with care, right? Helping those in need, and to be rewarded at the end of the day that there is a God. But if there is no God, guess what? You still left a legacy of hope on the planet, whether there was a God or not.
Yeah.
And that's how I think
That's
we
the whole
see
what
it.
if you're wrong thing. It's like an insurance policy for something
But
that
you're
still
living
you
the
have.
same
There
way.
is that's like an insurance policy for something that you still do not know exists, and that's we hear that from a lot of
But
Christians. The whole
can you
Pascal's
explain
wager,
everything?
because
You
I'm not
cannot-
trying to
you
explain
can't explain everything of the world either,
you know,
but you
going,
understand science.
Let's let her talk.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm
So so this is that assumes once again that if you don't believe in God, that you're not good.
That doesn't say
and
that.
yes,
Wait,
but
it's
that's
fundamental
exactly-
to our. Sorry to cut you off, but I feel a lot of this this belief that says that like, oh, you're not good if you don't believe in God. Christians believe that they're not good without God either. Like none of us are good in our own right. So to say that like, oh, Christians now have a pedestal to stand up and say like, hey, I'm better than you now. No,
That's
you're
a lot
not.
of y'all
It's God. No, listen, they're
Let me
wrong.
out.
Christianity is inherently racist.
This should be good.
I look at it from a legal perspective as Christianity, as it was built into law in the United States to classify the enslaved captives that came over, that were brought over, transported over from the continent of Africa, and used to justify the enslavement as well as the mistreatment of darker skinned people, using the curse of Ham that is in the Bible, even though the description of Jesus himself was not white as is depicted in
See, people? Now, for you guys that are listening out there, there's some people that don't understand or may know what she's talking about, but let me break it down to you. She's talking about the curse of Ham, like Ham had to do with all black people. No, Ham was the progenitor of Africans. There's some people that don't believe that all black people were Africans. Sort of like Chinese people and Japanese people are Orientals. Sort of like Philippines and so on. They may look alike and they may have some of the same ancestors, but they're not the same people. Chinese and Japanese are different people. Puerto Ricans and Mexicans are different people. Mexicans and Guatemalans are different people. All black people are not Africans. Some are Negroes. She's talking about Ham. Ham was the progenitor of the African people. And when you look in the Bible and you look at the breakdown of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, you'll see that there were three different people that had different nations. So she's going under the assumption and throwing everybody in one bowl and saying, all black people come from Ham. And she just left out Shem and Japheth. Let's go.
In popular culture. But the Christianity as we know it today and the distinct differences between certain non-black people and black folks and other people of color and the conditions of our community certainly imply that it is racist.
Even within the Old Testament, you're looking at these different groups of people, different tribes going to war with one another, and even, saying that my God wants you to be completely snuffed out. So yeah, it's always been wielded in a way that's been inherently racist.
I think this is an issue.
I disagree with everything she just said because it wasn't about race on what was going on in there. And what she was talking about in the Old Testament, that had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with worship and practice and what they were doing and the things that they were doing. So she's talking about what was going on there, but she totally left out the wickedness that was going on. Totally left it out.
Interesting point, because I do agree in many ways, not that Christianity is inherently racist, but that it was used in very racist ways to suppress people and oppress people and enslave people. So I absolutely do agree with that. And I think that another narrative, the slavery in the Atlantic slave trade also gets very sticky because you also had African slaves and tribes who were betraying their own people to give them away to these colonizers and more. So, I mean, it's like there's so much murkiness in that entire conversation that it's like one side over the other. Who's the lesser of two evils kind of thing, right? Those who are enslaving plus those who sold their families to the slavery,
Well, there were a number of captives that were kidnapped. So they weren't necessarily given over. Like you said, it does become a very, very murky and very ugly history overall. And so I definitely agree that, but yes, the justification, especially through the Catholic Church in one of the papal bulls, which actually endorsed the transatlantic slave trade. That is historic, that is a fact.
Right.
And so we have to, we cannot ignore that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good point, because even as Christians, regardless of our denominations, we have to look at the ugly parts and stand in it and admit it and that these were wrong and this happened, not try to excuse it. So I don't disagree with you on that. There's some really ugly things that the Catholic Church certainly did, and I don't deny that. And the only thing that I would disagree on is the fact that listen, I'm going to get it on the internet. I know Jesus was not white, y'all. Okay, so you can't tell me my God is a white man. So inherently in what it is, I don't see the racism in the original, but how it.
I'm glad you knew that some of us that do research and study would be here to hear you talking. I'm glad you realized that it was some people here that could actually prove that.
It's been used? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's important if you have a kernel of truth, and I don't know that we'll all even agree with what that kernel of truth is, and someone or something falls away from that truth, does it make the truth ineffective? Or does it make the falling away the most ineffective thing? Does that make sense? In other words, if there is a God, and I believe there is, but if there is a God and someone distorts that understanding or concept of God, does it make the God ineffective, or does it make what they've done in falling away from that kernel of truth?
There's a very simple way that this could be resolved, right? If there is any type of God, right? It could very much be cleared up by them appearing and dispelling all of these discourses, all of these different beliefs, all of these different it could possibly end the conversation, or it could end.
Mandisa, you're falling apart. I don't know if Tyler Burns has something to do with that or what. Showing up on your time? Obviously, you haven't read what some of us have read, because there will be an appearance. There will be an appearance at a certain time. So obviously you haven't been reading. You have your hands out, and you're saying, hey, why don't you just come down here so you can prove to me? That's the look that you have right now. Why don't you come down here and prove to you? Prove to you. Let's go.
All of this discourse right here.
I disagree because we believe that he already did that.
Yeah, it's really common too in the Old Testament.
We already believe that, and they killed him. So it's like
because of that.
Yeah,
and I agree. There's a lot of evidence that shows in that. I mean, you guys were talking about evidence earlier, and there's evidence in the Old Testament how the angel of the Lord had come in, how he had transformed Saul's life into Paul. There's a lot of evidence in seeing the bush burning on fire, Moses speaking to Moses, and so there is a lot of in that belief of understanding where Christ has come from and revealed himself through Old Testament.
The Bible is a book that does not have footnotes. It does not have points of reference, which means that it is a book of allegory. It is a book of stories. It is a book of things that cannot necessarily be replicated today. You can't see this. No one can talk through a burning bush today. If that could be replicated today, then maybe we could see validity in that.
Well, maybe if you had some DMT, which kind of leads into a lot of my own personal belief system, because I don't actually identify as atheist. I'm probably more agnostic than anything. And in recent years, I've come into a lot of African spirituality by way of Ifa, which a lot of people in West Africa would practice some form of Ifa. It gets, translated through the slave trade as Santeria in Cuba. It's showing up in hoodoo and voodoo throughout,
which the church
South.
deemed as witchcraft.
Exactly. Which it does have elements of that when you get into it, but it's misconstrued, and that.
I knew we were coming here. I knew we were going here, and guess what? I was getting that vibe from her the whole entire time. Started off with the blonde hair at the top. I knew she was into something, but I was not quite sure exactly what. But it's starting to come out now. Oh, I need to hear more.
Lens of Christianity being put on those things has given it a lot of negative connotation, when we really did that to have survival and a way to still connect to our culture. And a lot of it still was able to survive through sharing that belief system.
Can I say something real quick? So I'm Liberian. So like my parents, they're from Liberia. They're African. And I grew up with a lot of Nigerians as well from the Igbo tribe, and I see, and I don't know, are you Black American as well? Like, okay, cool. So I see this trend of people coming into African spirituality as if to say that that's something that even people in West Africa like believe in. But if you interact with those people, like the African people that are over here now,
Yeah, they probably
like
don't.
they don't. In
Yeah,
fact,
they
they also see it as a lot of them also see it as witchcraft.
Because they've also been colonized.
No, well, see, that's another thing, right? If we're going to talk about colonization, then we can't take away.
Boy, let me tell you something. I didn't think he was going to score a point all night, and he caught him. He caught him with the very thing that I was thinking. That she was talking the whole entire time about her African spirituality, like she had come into some esoteric information that nobody else had except the Africans. And what she don't understand is what he just told her is that the Africans, the actual Africans from the Igbo tribe that he's come into contact with, don't even practice that. And they believe it's witchcraft. I believe it's witchcraft. I don't support. I believe that leads to nowhere. But there was proof out there to prove it, and he's coming out with it, and he's calling on it right now. And the first thing that somebody comes out and said is because they were colonized. What does them being colonized have to do with the traditions of African culture? It's because Africans from Ham, remember, I told you that Ham was the progenitor of the African race. It's because they were practicing witchcraft. That was one of the reasons that they got in trouble. It's because they were practicing witchcraft. They was practicing things that they had no business practicing. And she's picked it up. See, people, when you listen very closely and very intently, you can pick up on things like this. I want to deduct a point so bad right now because she was holding all of that information in for the entirety of this show. And she's just coming out with it. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Those Black Africans freedom to also choose a religion for themselves.
No,
you know?
they can totally
So
choose for themselves. That's
yeah,
not
so
the
like,
issue.
so to say that they're colonized and that's why they believe what they believe, I feel like you're looking down on their ability to choose and understand right and wrong for themselves.
But it's just
And I
a
kind of find
fact
that
that they
offensive.
were
Just a little bit.
colonized, specifically Nigeria, because the majority of what I know about myself, my people did come from Nigeria. That was colonized by the British.
So see how you have the ability to look at your beliefs and even.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want y'all to take a look at something right now. That woman's wearing an upside down cross. Her cross is upside down. And I want you to look at that scoreboard. She has an upside down cross on. See, ladies and gentlemen, this is why subscribing to the Scoreboard Keepers is so important. This is why like, sharing, and commenting on the Scoreboard Keepers is so important. Because I guess she thought that we wasn't going to recognize that. This woman is sitting right next to a man that called her out on her nonsense because she didn't believe that anybody would know what she got going on. She didn't believe that nobody would pick up on what she got going on, and now she's on the hot seat, and look at her face. She's caught herself having to explain. And guess what popped out of her shirt, since there's only 2 buttons buttoned up? An upside down cross. Let's go. Scoreboard Keepers, y'all. Subscribe to the channel.
And if colonization had some type of oppressive thing on you, you still have the ability to choose whether or not that you believe in that. So do the Africans that are over there. They have the ability to look at their colonization, figure out what parts of their culture are disconnected from their religion, and they can still celebrate it. I want to go a little bit into my personal story because I know I'm going to rant a little bit, but I grew up in a African Liberian Pentecostal church in Minnesota. And over there, there's so much culture. Like not even a drip of it. Did I even understand that there was like whiteness like involved? You know, we have the same food. We sing our Christian songs in a different way than like white churches do. Even sometimes when I went to different white churches, I would be confused as to why they're not singing it the way that we're singing it. And so to say that like Christianity is this thing that deletes culture at its roots, I completely disagree with that, because that's where I grew up in.
Do Black atheists have a response to that?
Well, there are different, I mean, that's similar to how the Black church is here in the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen, he just destroyed her. She went off somewhere in the wilderness right now, and I'm pretty sure she won't be speaking on that topic again. If I had to bet, if I had to lay a wager right now when she bring that topic up again, I would tell you no.
United States, right? The Catholic Church probably does not do as much singing as like maybe a Baptist.
We got gospel masses out here in LA.
But that's interesting to know. But there are definitely some cultural differences in the way Black folks practice, and part of that is due to the racism because Black folks weren't allowed in certain white churches. What we don't understand about like white supremacy and colonization, that at times it's mental.
Yeah.
It can be mental. So even if it isn't overtly someone physically oppressing you, when we talk about the institutional practices, it means that it is ingrained into your mentality that it doesn't matter who it is. Even in your Pentecostal practice, if you are still worshiping Jesus, 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 and there are a lot of evangelical, like even on the continent now, where they are still putting white Jesus. I think in Ghana, there is a huge statue of white Jesus. So even if it is a predominantly Black practice, it is still sort of rooted in a Eurocentric and white mentality, and we have to think about that.
I think that's a response.
Well, actually,
So I was going to ask, like, what carryovers, and I'm actually very curious about this, what carryovers do you see from white colonization that you see in African practices today, other than white Jesus? Because we can look at white Jesus and be like, I can even agree that we should probably put up less white Jesuses up in churches, up in Black churches, up in African churches. But separate from that, what do you think is being deleted from our culture and our cultural expression of Christianity by adopting that into our belief system?
So it's the way we treat women.
Exactly.
It's the way we treat children.
Yeah.
It is the way that inherently we still don't stick together as well as we should. You know, these are things that are holdovers from colonization, from enslavement, that has been used to divide and conquer us. The way we still other each other.
Ladies and gentlemen, do y'all notice that chain got tucked back inside? Yeah, that cross got tucked back inside. I don't know what's going on there. But her expression, it's something going on there, guys. I'm gonna let you know right now, something going on
in a lot of ways. The one thing that we hear as atheists is that we're trying to be white.
Yeah.
We hear that, well, you're rejecting your Blackness as an atheist, which is the furthest thing from the truth. It is my Blackness that defines my atheism.
Yes.
You know, it is because I care about Black folks and the Black community. No, and even in our diversity, that makes that has defined. Or
Mandisa, no, what you mean is that the God that was given to the ancestors was just changed. It was just changed because everybody wanted that God to be talking about them. It didn't mean that the God didn't exist. It was just the writings and some of the photos were tampered with. And you're neglecting that, and nobody has yet to mention that yet on this show. The writings were tampered with, and so were the paintings. It does not mean and does not take away from a creator.
that has determined my conclusion.
I'll just say that, like, sometimes we conflate, like, general human nature, and I don't mean to disregard everything that you're saying, because I still think tribalism exists outside of Christianity. I still think misogyny exists outside of Christianity. I think racism exists outside of Christianity and all of these other things. So a lot of the times, what you're seeing is general human nature coming atop a belief system that preaches love, and it dilutes it, because that's who we are as humans. We're going to take something that's meant for love, and we're going to take something that's meant for unity, not uniformity, and we're going to use that to destroy like our relationships with other people. But the reason why I call myself a Christian is because I can look at a standard that's much higher than myself to say, hey, even though I have a lot of these differences with other people, we're all the same under God.
Let's move on to closing statements.
For me, remain curious, ask questions, do your own research. We should be creating things that we want to see out in the world, ways that we want to replicate goodness, love, charity, taking care of one another. So ultimately, that's what's most important. And why we always got to make God a he, like.
I love the conversation. I love the individuality. I love the commitment to it. I don't have a heaven or hell to put anyone in. I have a personal relationship, and I throw it out and I share it, and hopefully it makes a difference for the other person. And if it doesn't, he's given them the right to not choose it. As we discover who we are as Black people, as we discover who we are as people, as we probe into the divine, whether or not it's the universe, whether or not it's some other form of spirituality, that being open to the revelation that I am bigger, I am better, and eternal life is mine, whether or not that is the reincarnation or whether or not that is in living with him eternally. So
I think that everyone here has beautiful backgrounds, and they all gave beautiful stories, you know. And my final thought is just that when it does come to Black Christians, with the historical value of the Black church, I do believe that it is inherent for Black Christians to dedicate a portion of themselves to the Black power struggle and the Black movement. And that is my final thought.
My brother, thank you.
What a great show, what a great show, what a great show. I want to congratulate the Black Christians on their victory. And let me tell y'all something, ladies and gentlemen, this is why we do this up here at the Scoreboard Keepers, so we can hear everybody and we listen intently to what everybody says, so they're held accountable to what they're saying. And this is why, slowly but surely, even though the Black Christians got off to a slow start, you started hearing what the Black atheists were saying, and they just started throwing out a lot of things, hoping that it would stick to the wall. Their truth carried them only so far, to 25 points, their truth, because they stood on it. And you have to respect that. You have to respect their stance. If they don't believe in a God, they don't believe in a God. And that's what we did. We respected them for that. And then we heard their points and we said, hey, we got to respect their points also. But then after a while, the Christians started laying down their truths. Because at first they were being put on a hot seat about, even if there is a God. And then once they established their beliefs and where they were coming from, which took a while for Dan to come in there, Dan started going, he started going into a zone and laying down points. And then slowly but surely, things started coming out. So we had a girl up there with the blonde hair who's practicing, I believe that she's practicing witchcraft. And then lo and behold, out of her V-neck pops out an upside down cross. And she got called out on it because she thought that she was dealing with something so esoteric that nobody else would know about. And then sitting right next to her was a brother that's been practicing in a Liberian church right next to Africans who don't even practice what she's practicing from the continent where she got it from. Ladies and gentlemen, these type of things are important. These type of things are important. And this is why I want you guys to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Like, share, subscribe, and comment to the channel. Okay? And I want you guys to come up here and get involved. I want you guys to join me on this show because I want to hear your feedback. And once again, I want to congratulate the Black Christians on their 38-25 victory over the Black atheists. Okay? I want to congratulate you guys once again. Ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude our broadcast on the Black Christians versus the Black atheists. Once again, like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you want to get involved, and hit the notification bell also. And I will see you guys on the next episode of the Scoreboard Keepers. God bless and have a good night. This was fun.